Former President of the United States, Donald Trump, is expected to be arrested here within the next 48 to 72 hours. Yes, you heard me right. Donald Trump is expected to be arrested within hours. I want to react to two videos in this one. Usually I only do reactions on the reaction channel, right? And to get me to do a main channel video on a Saturday, it has to be some shocking news. But I got to say, this was not something I was expecting to be doing a video about here on a Saturday night, okay? But we're going to react to this one from CNN, and then as we'll be balanced as all things in life should be. We'll react to a video here. Tomi Lahren basically sounding off that it's a flimsy case against Trump, and we'll kind of get into some of the details around the case. What's realistic here in regards to this? This obviously has huge implications on even the stock market, right? Because let's just be honest, if Trump is arrested, there could be massive, and I mean absolutely massive, protests around the United States of America. If that, we'll see if things remain peaceful or if they got rough, or, there's a lot of moving dynamics in regards to this. So I want to watch this, react to this. But obviously this is a pretty shocking event. I would call it that. In the stock market, we call these sorts of events like a black swan event, when something happens so big that you were not expecting and it shakes the markets up in a huge way. And so this is not just a small thing. This is a pretty major thing here. So we'll react to it. Thanks everybody joining me as always. Thanks for being subscribed. We'll get into this.
Developments involving former President Donald J. Trump. Trump saying today he expects to be arrested on Tuesday and is calling for protests. He made the announcement today on his social media post, lashing out at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, which has invited him to testify before a grand jury. The arrest would be part of their investigation into alleged hush money payments to Stormy Daniels during the 2016 election. Again, if there is an arrest, that's according to Trump. Trump also called for protests over his pending arrest to, quote, take our nation back. This development comes as sources tell CNN that law enforcement agencies in New York are also now preparing for the possible indictment of Trump. CNN's Polo Sandoval is outside the Manhattan Criminal Courthouse for us, and we can also begin with CNN senior crime and justice reporter Caitlin Palant. So, Caitlin, to you first in Washington, what more do we know about this possible arrest that the former president is announcing on his social media post?
Well, Fred, when and what is going to be charged, if it is charged, we don't have the answer to that yet, and neither does Donald Trump. At this point in time, his team, through a spokesman, has made very clear that there has been no notification made to him or his lawyers that he...
So, Fox News believes they know the case now, but this is also from 1 hour ago. But I want to react to this one here.
Going to be indicted or when that indictment is going to happen. However, Trump is very aware of the politics of this and the bluster and the bully pulpit that he has. And so he is agitating for his team to try and get his base riled up. He did say in that post about protests, asking his supporters to protest in some way. He also is sending a message to the New York District Attorney, Alvin Bragg. And if we step back for a second, Fred, the reason that there is this expectation of Donald Trump that he will be indicted in New York by the DA is that the long investigation into the Trump Organization and payments made to Stormy Daniels for hushing her about an alleged affair she says that she had with the former president. Those investigation, that is nearing the end. We know that because there was an invitation to Trump himself to come into the grand jury and testify.
You know what I don't understand about the whole hush money situation there with the Stormy Daniels thing is like, that came out. So, like, what was the point if there was hush payments made and stuff like that, and somehow that... I'm just like, why'd they even do it? Like, I'm like, that was not a good decision, maybe on the legal front, obviously, but even on like the other front, I think it was a waste of money because everybody already knows about the whole Stormy Daniels situation. So I'm just like, that's one of those things that's like, oh my gosh, if he gets in trouble for that, that's crazy.
He declined to do that. We do understand through our reporting this morning that another witness is expected to testify before the grand jury on Monday. So it does not appear they've returned an indictment at this point that would cause Trump to come in and turn himself over that quickly. However, it does appear we are in the end stage of this, and the grand jury will be reviewing the evidence and at some point, very likely voting on whether the former president of the United States should be indicted. Fred?
All right. Thanks so much, Caitlin. Now let's go to Polo Sandoval outside the Manhattan courthouse. So, Polo, what can you tell us about any preparations by law enforcement agencies that might be taking place, especially after the former president will make that announcement via post?
Yeah, Fred, still with many questions about the when. They certainly don't want any question about the how they would handle all of this. And that's why you have these conversations that, according to our colleague John Miller, are ongoing among local, state, and federal law enforcement officials that are in close contact with also officials at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. The crux of the conversations there, exactly how to navigate this scenario with a potential indictment, and then also the choreography that would come involved with potential charges being filed against the former president. And that's why these conversations have been happening. And in this post-January 6th world, you better believe that courthouse security is one of the big parts of the conversations that are happening right now, with law enforcement officials privy to the discussion saying that they are preparing for potential demonstrations for pro-Trump demonstrators to come together here in Lower Manhattan, and the potential of any possible clashing with anti-Trump demonstrators. And so this is certainly something that is top of mind behind the scenes as they prepare for the coming days. And certainly also the U.S. Secret Service having their separate discussions about how it would work in terms of getting the former president to Manhattan, getting processed, getting potentially booked here when and if that indictment is announced. And this is a routine, Fred, that we should mention is certainly...
That's crazy. Like, the fact that the Secret Service is going to be involved in this whole situation and everything, like, it's just, like, so mind-blowing to, like, even process this, right? Just crazy, man, on so many different fronts. And, yes, security. Oh, my gosh, can you imagine the security they're going to need? I mean, that's... the undertaking of something like this, if they're going to pull this off, holy smokers, that ain't no joke.
Unusual for the New York State court system here, but it's certainly, because of the complexities that come with this, it certainly would rise to the level of being unprecedented as we prepare for the coming days.
Right, and that involving a former president. Polo Sandoval, Caitlin Palance, thanks so much. We'll check back with you throughout the afternoon. Let's talk more about this right now with Elliot Williams. He is a former federal prosecutor and a CNN legal analyst. Elliot, good to see you. So what do you make of the former president who would say this via his social media post? Do you believe that he has any particular intel that says he might be arrested on Tuesday?
Well, let's look at the good, the bad, and the ugly of it, right, Fred? Look, the truth is he might have received heads up from law enforcement that he had a surrender date as of whatever, whether it was Tuesday or Wednesday, and that he had to turn himself into law enforcement by then or face an arrest, right? Now, that's, if this were all working normally and accurately, of course, that would be how prosecutors and law enforcement in New York would handle it. Or he's just making it up based on things that he read in the newspaper. And there's no way to know either of those things. But to be clear, this is to Polo's point, there's nothing novel about a defendant getting a call from law enforcement prior to being asked to turn himself or herself in.
Okay, so then on that first point then, when you say, you know, there may be a surrender date, and then it might say you face arrest, you know, if you don't comply. So what is usually the gap between that? If he did receive a, you know, surrender date notice of a Tuesday, if he didn't comply right away, then would that mean a matter of hours within the same day or days?
Within a day. I mean, I'm sorry about that. It's within a day. It would be your surrender date's Tuesday. We can arrest you starting what, you know, maybe it lists a time, 5 p.m. and at 5:01 p.m. you're subject to arrest. Now, they may reach out to your attorney or they may try to get you to come in, but no, you are subject to being arrested by, this would be, you know, NYPD cops or whomever else, as soon as that surrender moment or date passes.
Okay, so any potential indictment, you know, or arrest would stem from the probe of Trump's alleged hush money payment to former adult film star Stormy Daniels. Are we talking about a misdemeanor or felony?
It could be either. You know, under New York state law, there is a I'm admitted to practice in New York. There's a misdemeanor for business record violations. He could be charged with that. If, in fact, those business record lying or misrepresenting on business records was in furtherance of committing a crime, which here might be campaign finance or campaign violations, then it bumps up to a felony with a 4-year maximum prison sentence. So, but it's just hard to know. And this
Could you imagine he gets 4 years for this stupid payment that everybody like? Oh my gosh. That's insane.
Caitlin Polan's point earlier in the segment, we don't really know, other than what's sort of leaked out, what the former president might be being investigated for right now.
All right. So I'm going to have to ask you, put into context a lot of this, because the indictment and, or a potential indictment and potential arrest of a former president for criminal charges, is unprecedented. But help people understand kind of the journey here, because it's been a case, of a very long time. It was the beginning of his presidency, during the campaign, when a lot of this came to light. So what does this tell you about now, potentially, there might be an arrest or surrender date? What does that tell you about the case, potentially, and the path it's been on?
Yeah, absolutely. The events of this case stretch back 6 or 7 years. It's not like someone commits a crime yesterday and you go and arrest them. So number one, it's a very long saga if it ends up in an arrest or a prosecution over what might be a misdemeanor that happened 6 or 7 years ago. Now, certainly there's a great deal of public interest in the matter. But it is a relatively older matter. But again, it's significant. And it's also logistically complicated, I think, to arrest a president of the United States. You got Secret Service everywhere tracking his. So all of this creates a bit of a mess, both legally but sort of practically.
Oh my gosh! Then that brings me to: would Secret Service assist in his surrendering?
What they should. They would receive. Again, we've never seen this before, but they would receive notification from the New York's, whether it's the state troopers, the NYPD, about, we intend to have this person surrender himself or get arrested on this date. And law enforcement agencies talk to each other all the time about such things. Now, again, you don't ever really see the circumstance of a former president being arrested, but that's how it would work if it were working correctly.
Okay, before we get to this next clip, my 2 cents on is Trump actually going to have to do any time for his situation. My personal opinion is, and we'll hear what they have to say here on Fox News, my opinion is probably not. I'll just be completely honest. Whether an arrest actually happens, maybe that's definitely a possibility, but there's a big difference between an arrest and actually having to go away and do time for something like that. And I think, honestly, with Trump and his obviously legal team there, I think there's a fairly low probability, we'll call it that actually was to happen. But nonetheless, it's a dramatic thing for, obviously the United States to go through here. And obviously it's a dramatic thing for the market to go through, because we don't know what's actually going to happen here and the potential chaos or not chaos this could cause, because this is not just any president. Let's be honest. This is not just any president that's getting arrested here in regards to this.
A criminal defense and litigation attorney, as well as a former assistant U.S. attorney, and as well as our panel here. But Alex, I'm going to start with you. First of all, how hard is it to prove, number one, for them to say that this was a political stunt? This alleged affair took place back in 2006. The money allegedly exchanged hands between Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels to cover up the truth, which would be the equivalent of an NDA, you could say. In 2016, which obviously happened before the election, in the midst of this election. But the question is, how do you prove that it was to hide information before an election? That must be hard to prove.
It can be. This has been done before. There was a case against John Edwards in federal court that had very similar facts about hiding an alleged affair. And you do it by showing that the information, if it came out, would have been detrimental to the campaign, that people within the campaign thought so. I think certainly when this news leaked, the way the former president reacted, denying this information.
I'll be honest. I don't think anybody that voted for Trump would have changed their vote based upon any information around Stormy Daniels. I'll be completely honest. I don't think there's one person that voted for Trump that would have been like, oh, the Stormy Daniels thing. Oh, he had an affair with her. I'm not voting for him now. Give me a break. With all the stuff that was going on around Trump during that time, give me a break. Come on, man.
They would have thought at the time that it would have been detrimental. So I don't think that's as big a hurdle as some of the legal theories they're going to have to get over to get a conviction.
I also think it sounds a bit speculative that the president knows that he's being arrested, because typically you don't tell somebody they're about to get arrested or indicted for something before it happens, no?
Well, also, not everybody's the president or has the type of information the former president of the United States has, right? We should take that into account, maybe?
That that basically doesn't happen as a rule. You don't tell a target they're going to be indicted. You may tell their lawyers, listen, this is coming. We want your guy to turn himself in. And if that's happened, that may be the information, but there's no suggestion from his lawyers that they believe that information is necessarily correct. It may happen next week. It may happen 2 weeks from now. It may never happen.
All right, I'm going to turn to my panel right now. I want to go with you, Tommy, because a lot of people are basically just saying that this is a political witch hunt. The president obviously is saying so, and many others have said so as well. Let's put up the headlines. Wall Street Journal op-ed, Trump's legal peril in Manhattan. New York, The Sun, indicting Trump would be targeted injustice. The Washington Times writing, weaponization of the legal system reaches a whole new level. So, I mean, yeah, you could say this is a political witch hunt, but also there are those that are saying that there's federal money possibly that's being spent on this investigation, which obviously leaves me scratching my head.
Yeah, and Speaker McCarthy did speak to that. So that remains to be seen. I really do count on our House Republicans to make sure that that's not the case. But just going back to the motivation behind all of this, listening to all of it, it sounds like they have a flimsy case at best. Certainly not to the level of handcuffing a former president and the leading contender for 2024. So what this feels like to me is what they've done to this man over and over and over again. It's not necessarily the legal ramifications themselves and the merit legally, it's more the perception. There are still Americans out there that watch other networks that think that Trump is a Russian agent. And so when you levy these accusations, they stick. Whether it ends up coming to fruition or not, it sticks. But what this is also going to do, it's going to fire up the MAGA crowd. Maybe those people that were possibly leaning more towards a Ron DeSantis, now they go, here we go again, another witch hunt against our guy. I'm standing firm with Donald Trump. And I also think that this is a motivation of the left. I think that they would rather have Trump supporters galvanize behind Trump because I think that they know that Trump is easier to beat than Ron DeSantis.
Ben, you were mentioning earlier before we started the show that...
Interesting perspective from her there. Basically believing that Democrats believe it's going to be easier to beat Trump than it is going to be DeSantis. I would love to know from you guys in the comments section, who do you think is harder to beat? Do you think DeSantis is going to be harder to beat, or do you think Trump's harder to beat? I would love to hear from you guys in the comments section. I know everybody's always got an opinion on this stuff, so if you got an opinion on that, let me know in the comments section. I'll definitely be kind of going through it and just see.
Had Chris Christie on your show, and he had nothing good to say about Ron DeSantis.
He didn't.
He's also not a fan of Trump. So, I mean, the majority are in Trump's corner when it comes to polls.
Christie is a former federal prosecutor.
Yes,
so I was asking him about the facts of this case, and he said, I have no idea what's going to happen, but if this were heading toward an indictment, this is exactly how the facts would be playing out up to this point. So it seems like everyone, including the former president, is expecting an indictment and an arrest. I do have a question for Alex here on the legal side of things. Sure. Alex, I was reading this piece. This is in the New York Times, how the Times actually reported this out. They said, quote, the case against the former president hinges on an untested and therefore risky legal theory involving a complex interplay of laws, all amounting to a low-level felony. What do you make of that? Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, I think that's a correct read of what's happening. The sad fact of the matter is prosecutors do that across the country every day with people much less important than the former president. Prosecutors are not known for their discretion. They're not known for taking it easy on people. And so here they've got a theory they think is viable, and they're going to pursue it. But I think it's important to remember here, President Trump isn't really a victim. I mean, if the facts as alleged pan out, I mean, that's something you shouldn't be doing as a presidential candidate. You shouldn't have been doing it as a president. Whether or not it's illegal is what's going to be tested. And they're going to have to figure out whether the courts will let them do it.
And, you know, Julie, I would just point out, he said DAs and prosecutors aren't known for going easy on people.
No.
One exception might be this guy, who actually goes easy on felons a lot of the time.
Yes, that is true.
That's a relevant piece to this as well.
No, I am actually so glad that you brought that up because, you know, never mind the criminals out on the streets that are actually killing people daily. I mean, the stories of crime in democratic cities in this country are clearly to blame district attorneys, you know, liberal district attorneys who are letting it happen. But, Jimmy, Fox News poll comes out with this 2024 Republican nominee preference among Republican primary voters. I don't know if these numbers might be scaring the left a little bit, but I don't know. Could this have something to do with this investigation? Donald Trump at 43%, Ron DeSantis 28%. So that means that Trump is actually up.
He is, and that's before he just got the greatest re-election slogan of all time, which is tanned, arrested, ready. That's pretty good. We'll play off the old one. Listen, my heart right now, in all honesty, it breaks for the country because we're in a really dangerous place. We could potentially be 48 to 72 hours away from seeing a former president in handcuffs. That's
never seen before.
It's never happened in the 246-year history of the country. It's going to be powerful. It's going to be divisive. It reads as a banana republic type of move to a lot of people on the right.
Yeah.
And what I'm concerned with is this act reads as so brazenly political by Alvin Bragg. It reads like an act of political self-preservation because he is wildly unpopular. Crime is spiking here in New York, and he has a storied history of taking something like a misdemeanor, a felony, and downgrading it to a misdemeanor.
Right.
In this case, he's taking a misdemeanor and upgrading it to a felony, and if you live anywhere in New York, Trump has a better chance of going free if he threw somebody in front of a train somehow, which doesn't make sense, but that's the New York we're living in. New York right now looks like Gotham City before Batman comes, but he can't come because he's not vaccinated.
Right.
Okay, nobody in New York right now who's fearing for their life walking the streets is like, gee, if only we rang up an ex-president for paying off a stripper, okay? Their priorities are not the priorities of the regular people.
Are you going to defend that behavior?
No.
Let's talk about that.
No.
Just to be fair, I don't think anybody's walking the streets of New York City wondering if they're going to lose their life. There's much like if I think about where I would want to walk around, New York City's actually one of the places I would want to walk around. If you think New York City's bad, you haven't been many places. That's all I'll say. You haven't been many places.
No, this is what I wanted to ask you, though, Alex.
The behavior.
Alex, I can't condone the behavior, but what I can tell you is, as a New Yorker, we're watching such a brazen disregard for the well-being of women who are getting stabbed and raped and thrown in front of trains that it feels like a misappropriation of justice. Now, how this plays out in the legal system as it pertains to Trump, I understand we can do two things at once. But the question I wanted to ask you is this. There's so much talk about potential charges for Trump down in Georgia. Is there any concern in Georgia, this being a more legally precarious case in terms of it hinging on an untested legal theory? We know prosecutors always want to win the first case. Is there concern in Georgia that if this case fails, it taints their motive in Georgia in the eyes of, the court of public opinion?
I don't think so. These cases are going to take a long time. I think there's a good chance this case can never go to trial before the next presidential election. But the real issue around the different investigations, and there's three of them, the investigation in Georgia, then the federal investigation by the special counsel, is what that sort of says to each of those prosecutors about the behavior of the individual. You'll remember the Department of Justice did not charge this crime. In the Michael Cohen indictment, they said that the facts that are at issue here happened, and they decided not to charge it. Alvin Bragg has made a different decision. And part of that may have to do with the continued unlawful behavior of the president in other circumstances. When you're a prosecutor, you look at the entire body of work, so to speak. It's like evaluating teams getting into the NCAA tournament. What is this individual's entire body of work? Do they deserve prosecution? And so to pull out those other cases, I think it does lend some context to what's happening here.
Okay.
All right. Well, really great discussion. I wish we had more time.
Interesting. So, nonetheless, folks, we got a dramatic situation on our hands. You heard both sides of it there, the CNN side, obviously the Fox News side. The possibilities of arrest sound very serious and very possible. The chances Trump would actually have to go away, I think, is much more slim. But for the market, for the stock market specifically, I think it's really the arrest that's the huge deal. And if that happens, the potential protests, does anything get violent? Does it not get violent? Is everything peaceful? Is there chaos? That's a whole can of worms that we don't know as of right now, but we're going to see within the next 48 to 72 hours if it actually happens. So I appreciate everybody joining me as always. Holy smokers, that's a no jokers. This is a pretty dramatic situation. Thanks for being subscribed, folks, and have a great day.